All right, so this is a continuation of the first one I did about the Trinities. We're going to carry on with the Trinity of Fear. So I showed you the metaphysical one. So let's just start with this quote. This is when I first watched this movie, I never really understand its true impact and what it was true, the true message it was sending. Just in a recent year or two, I've actually really starting to get the full effect of what all these terms are really, what the real signal, I guess, behind the messaging was. So here it says, you have to understand most people are not ready to be unplugged. As many of them are so inert, I think it said inert, so hopelessly dependent. And that's a really important word here, dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. So just remember it said hopelessly dependent, right? That's a deliberate action. And so the word I'm going to throw here is structural violence. Hopefully I'll explain that later. So then I need to move back to this Trinity, the metaphysical one, because that's at the center. That had to be set up first. None of this would be possible if we didn't give up our internal authority to give it to some external authority that we never get to see. Okay, that's the curtain, one that you might, the curtain that's in the Wizard of Oz. This is this structure. So to actually give up your own authority puts you in a state of confusion. Like I said, none of us actually feel wonderful because that's our internal intelligence. You know, that's our consciousness directing us to when things are out of balance is when we give up our authority to someone else, something else, some other idea. That's why we have those unpleasant feelings and it's motivating us to act. Yet, because we suppress it with our ego, then we stay in this perpetual state of confusion because our ego is preoccupied with our self-image and survival. So it's going to suppress our consciousness if the conditions of life require us to actually believe in things that our consciousness cannot ever accept. So then I need to bring up the natural law expressions so you can see how it works. So let me just bring up the natural law expressions. So as you can see here, the generative polarity, so what we use to create. So if we're in that position of love, we're accepting a truth and the one universal truth. But if we're in fear, and that's consciousness, that's accepting of what our consciousness knows. If we're in fear, we're shutting down our consciousness. And then that leads to ignorance, which is the refusal of truth, where when we're in love, we're in knowledge, which is the acceptance of truth. And then we get down to confusion, right? This is internal anarchy. So internal means like from within, and anarchy and absence, archy from archon, a ruler. So an absence of a ruler. Now, how do you create that state? What does that, why is that important? So let's give some definition to confusion and see if I can help that along. But first, I actually need to bring it up. So 1 second. Here it is. So confusion is the negative internal expression of natural law. Hence the emotional response stimulated when one is in fear. That means opposition to knowledge of natural law, resulting in internal anarchy, which means an absence of a ruler from within, creating the conditions for slavery. Now, remember that Trinity I showed you, that if you believe in the whole Trinity of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, that there's an external authority outside of you. Well, that's you now living in a state of internal anarchy. There's no ruler from within. Right? That's you giving up your rulership of yourself, the kingdom of you. So that's how the conditions of slavery are created once you give that up. So it has to happen in the mental realm first. Let me just give some more definition to confusion, just to help that along a bit more. There we go. So the state of internal anarchy where the mind is ruled by fear and ignorance. So ignorance means to ignore that which is, ignore that which you know, well, intuitively anyway. A state of opposition within one's own consciousness by being torn apart from within. So this is where the three aspects of your consciousness are in direct opposition to one another. Such as thoughts, emotions, and actions are in perpetual contradiction to each other. So remember, I did explain that whole thing that when you're believing that someone's above you, that there's a superior, inferior, once you go into that, well, that causes an internal conflict inside you because your intuition, your consciousness knows that there is no actual external ruler. Because if it did, you'd feel amazing, you'd feel wonderful, you'd want more, you'd want to be dominated all the time. But I've not seen evidence of anyone enjoying being dominated by someone else in any way, shape, or form, whether that's a physical being or whether that's in a mind construct. So that's your three aspects being torn apart right there. So that's what needs to happen for you to actually be a good slave. That's why they created that structure, that Trinity, that metaphysical Trinity. And out of that metaphysical Trinity came this physical Trinity. So we've all heard about the triad, the three aspects of power that's been running the world. So you've got the Vatican there. That's obviously the decision maker, the one that's running the whole thing, the bank. I guess it is a bank, and it's also the power structure behind, which is the funding arm. This is the actual financial arm, London. And here's the military arm, right? This is the action, right? This is what puts it into, manifests it into reality through here, because you need to have an enforcer. So this is the enforcer, Washington. This is the order giver, yeah? These guys issue the motivation through the money, yeah? Like the emotions, the motivator. And here, this is the action, right? There it is. So thought, emotion, action, same Trinity. So you can see everything's based on a Trinity for a reason, because it comes from those three aspects of our consciousness. And that's how that's actually driven into us. And then how do we do it on a local level, right? In a day-to-day one? Well, then they've created the banking trust Trinity, which I've gone into before. So here you go, executor. That's the judge, sits on the bank, the bench, the administrator of the trust they created. So the Bible is also known as banking trust law as well. So you'll see a lot of excerpts coming out of the Bible. They use that heaps when it comes to anything to do with trust law. The creditor, that's meant to be you, the living man, but you'll never find out about that, how to even become that. And if you do, there'll be so many obstacles in the way that make it so complicated. And there's also, obviously, you're putting yourself at risk, great physical risk if you are doing that. And then this is what you're always being subjected into, being the debtor. So there's that fear. This is all the fear Trinity, right? This is that control structure that's required from using fear. And this is how it's done on a day-to-day basis. This is how we're administered as slaves, right? Because there's a CQV trust, there's Sestui, I think it's Sestui KV trust that they created, that they're dipping out of every single time you go into their fake courts. And that's how they administer us as slaves, because that's that corpus juris system, which is just a euphemism for slavery. So that's the fear Trinity. And now how does that link up with the first thing that I brought up? So let me just pause for a moment so I can bring it up again. Remember this first image that I brought up about no activity can be successfully pursued by an individual who is preoccupied, since the mind, when distracted, absorbs nothing deeply, but rejects everything which it is, so to speak, crammed into it. So what's done to you is that you need to go to work. Now, what's work about, right? It is about cramming so much into you, and you're so distracted with all the things that you don't actually really care. That's nothing to do with your spiritual awakening or your spiritual development. Work is about suppression of your spirituality. That's why they created these jobs, and a lot of them are what they call BS jobs. So it could crush your spirit. So you will know that when you go to work, how many people actually really, really enjoy the whole experience. You might enjoy the people you interact with, but not too many, unless it's something really specialized that you do that's, is really giving. And if you really connect to how honestly you are giving to society, like when I say society, I mean to each other spiritually, very few jobs will do that. So on a real sort of deep spiritual connection side, where you're getting a connection is actually through the interactions you will have with each other. And a lot of people confuse that with their actual job, the occupation, which you're being preoccupied with. Hence the word, it's an occupation. It occupies your times. So you're the most precious things that you have that belong to you is your time and energy. Yeah, and you can't return that. So if you're constantly distracted with work and all the other pressures that the system of dependence, remember that what I said in the first video about being hopelessly dependent? Well, they created a system for us where we were all dependent on this money. So we're going to go into money in the next video I do, and how that's all related. Remember, I did show you this image in the first one. So money is the way by which we get preoccupied. And so hopefully in the next one, I'll be able to explain that. So that'll do for this one.